Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back. Welcome back to the PorscheCooled Podcast. It's Wednesday evening here in Bahrain. It's about 5 minutes to 8. I'm about to connect with Zoom, as I always say at the beginning of these Owner Stories episodes. If you haven't been here before, welcome. If you have, welcome back. This is the Owner Stories. Like I said, Owner Stories part of the podcast. Owner Stories is where I, Michael Barth, that's my name, talk to various owners around the world about their Porsche journey, about how they got into Porsche and the cars they've owned, or the cars that they have, the cars they currently own, or the cars that they have owned before. I really enjoy doing this. It's a really good, I don't know, how do I call it? I've always said it's my sort of source of relaxation in a way, where I just where I chat to people I haven't met before, but chat to them with a common bond, which is Porsche or 911. Anyway, as you can see, when it gets to 8 o'clock, I'm a little bit delirious. Devon, that's who's joining me today. I've got Devon coming in. Devon's coming in from the US. I should know where Devon's from. I know he's from California. Devon is actually a friend of Brian, who was on Owner Stories number 49. That's how he reached out to me. I don't know a lot about Devon's story. I know that's a common thread that I keep saying, but with a lot of the Owner Stories, I know a lot of you guys reach out to me and say, you give me all the information and tell me all about your story beforehand. It's kind of nice when I just find out the key things, like the cars you've owned and the car you own now. And then all the other things, I kind of like finding out along the way with the listeners, with you guys. I kind of like finding out, how it all progresses to where the person is today. And Devon's, that's exactly what's going to happen this evening. Like I said, I don't know much about Devon's story. I know he has owned a few Porsches. I know he's got a very interesting one at the moment, or an interesting one that I think is being worked on. He's also a clothing designer, so we are going to have a good chat, I'm sure. But let me just see if Zoom is working. I haven't actually checked it yet, and let's connect with Devon in the US and talk about his PorscheCooled owner story. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to Owner Stories. So now I know where Devon's from. Devon's from the Bay Area. He is from California. I got that right. I just didn't know exactly where. Devon, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on and chatting with me today.
Oh, Michael, I'm such a fan and so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm glad you reached out. As I mentioned in the intro, you're a friend of Brian's from number 49. The listeners will remember Brian has my memory's here, 996.1 Carrera 2 Cabriolet. In blue, in that nice blue. I can't remember the name of the blue now, but the cool blue. But I'm glad you reached out. I mean, this is what I like about Owner Stories, Devon, is that, friends of friends contact me, other people recommend people. It's just a really good part of the Porsche community. It's a good way of connecting.
Yeah, the social circle is a fun part of the Porsche world. By the way, I'll let Brian divulge his potential changes in his car world, but that I almost acquired that Cabrio from him. But that deal didn't go through, but it's there could be some change in Brian's future. I know it hasn't happened yet. But
he's selling it?
There's a potential upgrade in the works. And it was like a last minute thing. All of a sudden I got a text from him and I was like, wow. And I'm like running in to tell my wife, hey, maybe let's go drive Brian's Cabrio. We might buy this cab. And the deal didn't end up happening, but it sounds like he may be making some moves. So we'll let him come back on and tell the story.
It sounds like you're in the market for another 911, which we'll get into. It sounds like you are still looking.
I'm always in the market. I love cars. I'm always in the market for 911s.
Let's start there then, because you did tell me you're a car nut, and you're working on a car at the moment. We'll get into that. Let's start at the very beginning. Where I always like to start is where it all started with you. And we talk about this as your first memories of Porsche. Your first memories of Porsche being whether it's the Matchbox or the Hot Wheels car, or it's a friend that owned a Porsche, or someone in the street that you used to see drive by, or even your father or uncle owned a Porsche. Was Porsche something that you remember from your childhood? Was it something that has always been there, or is it something that happened, much later in life for you?
Well, I'll be honest. As a California kid with a father who was very much into American cars, I I really didn't have Porsche on my radar as a child. I loved Porsche, Ferrari, Lamborghini, had posters all over my walls and all the Hot Wheels. I remember I had a 911 Hot Wheel, and definitely a fan of the car, but I didn't understand it or appreciate it. And so it started with me on the Porsche, and with a very good friend and mentor who, we would get together and drink beers. And I think I started doing this with him in my early 20s, drink beers and talk about cars. And it ends up, we'll come full circle on this, but the current 911 I own used to belong to him. Oh, okay. And so he kind of molded my perspective on the automotive front, because I was really into the big V8s and for a long time had, a lot of American cars, and then was into Jaguar, and, I have a whole transitionary story, but it probably didn't really click for me with 911s until I was in my early 20s.
What are the memorable cars along the way then? It started, you said in the 20s you started noticing 911s, or you bought a 911
Yeah.
You started noticing
them? That's when I really started goal setting for one. Cars for me started, my father, who really was into cars as a kid. And when I was, about driving age, my parents weren't in the financial position to drive fancy cars. So I learned on some pretty ridiculous cars, a terrible, like 1976, Volvo with a 5-speed that was just brutal, but it taught me how to, drive a stick and drive it around the neighborhood. But he bought me, when I turned 16, a 1966 Ford Mustang.
Oh, okay.
And white. And so I started driving that, working on that, wrenching on that with my friends. Basically, something would break on that car almost weekly, it felt like. So you're either underneath it replacing a starter, or banging the starter with a hammer in the morning because it was cold, or, I was wiring up sound systems or putting in new, exhaust or whatever it might be. And so it started with that Mustang, and that was definitely a memorable car, as it was almost in California, cars can almost define you, especially at that age. I spent so much time cruising and really, establishing my personality in that car.
But that's a very cool car to have as a 16-year-old.
Oh yeah, it was.
That is something you're going to get noticed in. That's for sure. Even in the US, right?
Yeah.
It's still a very cool car.
Yeah, it was, and it actually belonged to a friend who was like the high school quarterback and a really big guy around town. So when I bought it from him, it was already known in town. Everybody kind of knew the car, and so it was really fun. I passed that car on to my brother. My younger brother started driving it when I left the house after high school. And then there was a series of miserable cars that aren't worth, I didn't have a budget for great cars, but there's a series of bad cars until another Mustang, a 5.0 Fox body that, again, I did a load of work on, just really spent a lot of time on the motor and exhaust and lowered it and just did a ton of work until I smashed it into the back of a Ford Explorer because I didn't do the brakes. I did everything else.
So what's the attraction of the Mustang then?
Well, at that point it was so cultural. I think if I look back on it, like now what I know about cars, I'm not attracted to, the Fords, the Mustangs, the Camaros, the Corvettes as much as I was then. It was much more this, kind of classic Americana, just easy to work on. Parts were accessible. Just there were fun cars. I didn't know a thing about how mechanically superior the 911 was, nor did I understand how much more fun they are to drive, because now I'm in a car that's only 3 years newer than the car that I drove in high school. And the 69 911 I drive now is worlds different as a driving experience. It's unbelievable. It's amazing to me that they were made in the same period.
That's actually a very good thing to have today, though, isn't it? So you can look back and you can think about that Mustang that you had, and you can think about the 911, and you see the difference. You know what I mean? Whereas back then you wouldn't have seen the difference, right? When you first got it, when you were 16, or you would not have noticed that.
Oh, not at all.
I can see the attraction. I see the attraction of muscle cars. I mean, in Australia, we didn't really have Mustangs, obviously, because they only came to Australia a few years back. But obviously, there was always the Australian type muscle cars, which were based on US cars in a way. Mm-hmm. And I remember my aunt used to have these very old US cars that she used to buy at auction. She used to just buy up old US cars that somehow got into Australia. I don't know if they were left-hand drive or right-hand drive. I can't even remember now if they were converted. So that's what I always remember about these big US cars that she used to drive around in them. So you've had the Mustangs. You know how to work on a Mustang. You know how to fix one. What comes next? Are we thinking about Porsche now? Are we at the point in your life where you have a bit of extra money and you have some time to think about it and say, okay, I'm going to start looking at Porsche, or you go into something else before that?
Well, as a car junkie, I mean, I'm like worse than a petrol head. I have like an obsession with cars, and my life literally revolved around what car I was driving. My identity was so closely tied to the quality of the car that as soon as I started making decent money, this is like, I started a company in my early 20s and started seeing clients. I thought, I need a car with prestige. So I bought my first Jaguar. I went from, muscle car to Jaguar, and I loved it. I mean, I drove it a bunch. It was a bit underpowered. It was an XJ6L, so the long rear seat. I felt like kind of a sophisticated guy driving around in a Jaguar, and the car was very reliable. I found a great local mechanic and started to learn about Jaguars. Obviously, a little different mechanical makeup than the Fords that I was used to. So I drove that for a while, and then immediately had a hunkering again for that muscle power. Yeah. And so started looking at supercharged V8s, and went to the S-Type R, the Jaguar S-Type R with the supercharged V8 and the BMW 6-speed in it. And I drove that until it was basically done. I mean, I put 100,000 miles on that car and just loved it.
And was that reliable, that one? Because, Jaguar and reliability doesn't always come hand in hand,
I think that's almost a misconception.
Yeah, depreciation and unreliability is usually what people think of when they think of early Jaguars.
Yeah, I totally agree. And with that XJ6L, I had a really good experience. It really was pretty reliable. It didn't have the cool factor that I was hoping it would, to be honest. So I bought it thinking, man, this thing is going to be so cool. And it was just underpowered and felt like a dad car. So the S-Type R still had that refined driving experience, but with a ton more power. And I had literally zero issues. I mean, Brembo brakes on it, I was able to change myself. Oil changes were pretty easy. I took it to my local mechanic for, some maintenance work, but in general, it was exceptionally reliable, and I really enjoyed the car. It really is what pushed me into European cars these things can move and they can drive, and what's my next goal? And so that's where I started goal setting for the 911. At that point, I'm meeting with my friend and mentor for drinks. We're talking about cars, we're talking about women. And of course, Porsche comes up. He has had Porsche and had this 911 sitting in the garage that I just kept looking at going, man, I got to get my hands on that car. That car is so beautiful. And so that's really what pushed me into it.
Let's get into, I can see the attraction with Jaguar. I mean, my now father-in-law had one, and I can't remember what it was. It was burgundy, and it was a four-door, and it was an 80s model, 81. And that was about 20 years ago or 15 years ago. And I drove it a few times, and it was an enjoyable car to drive in. It was a beautiful car inside, the leather and the wood.
Right.
I remember how quickly the petrol gauge went down, though. How it went down very, very fast. I remember that, just going across in Sydney, the Harbour Bridge, and then back again, and thinking, wow, that's a lot of gas just for a small distance. So you've had the muscle cars. You've gone into the English Jaguars. Jaguars, it's a great car. It's got the heritage, it's got the history, it's got racing history. And then you think, okay, now I'm ready for a Porsche. Is that how it happens? And you've got your friend, you're out drinking with him, he's talking about Porsches.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
How did the first one come about, and when did it come about, Devan?
Well, so my first child had just been born, and I was producing at a higher level in my career and was really starting to goal set. And goal setting's been a really important thing for me in my life. And so I set a goal. I said, if I hit this number in production and sales production, I'm going to buy a dream car. And I just wrote down my dream cars, right? Ferrari F355, Porsche 911 Turbo, just wrote these cars down and said, these are the 3 or 4 that I really want to look for. And then in the evenings after work, I would spend time on the car websites that we all know, scrolling, just looking at what might be up there, And my son's maybe 8 months old at this point. My family's just getting started. and I'm at work. I actually remember seeing the car in the car website, and it had been, and it's funny because I just listened to your last owner story. This seems to be a theme, but it was marked as a Carrera, but I looked at the photo and it had an aero kit on it. And I was like, wait a minute, there's not that many Carreras with an aero kit. Maybe it's some sort of one-off. Maybe the guy put the kit on, but it looks cool. So I popped on there and I'm looking at the photos and I'm looking at the interior and the options. And I'm like, this is not a Carrera. This is a turbo, but they have it marketed as a standard Carrera. They had it priced as like a standard Carrera.
Really?
It was incredible. It was at a dealer in Beverly Hills. I called the dealer immediately. I got the, option sticker sent over. They didn't have the window sticker. It was a trade-in.
Yeah.
And so I looked up all the factory options. I hop on the phone again after checking. I confirmed with Porsche America, and after checking the options list, and was just blown away with what it had. It had, full carbon. It had the factory aero kit. Didn't have the X50 package, but it just really well spec'd out car. And so I hop on. I had the sales girl do a walk around with her phone. She sent me a bunch of photos. And basically I said, look, I'm going to fly down tomorrow and buy it. But I want to make sure if I buy this ticket, you're not going to sell it out from underneath me.
Yeah.
So what was the year?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. So it was a 2001 996.
And how old was it then when you purchased it? What year was that?
That would have been in 2014.
2014.
So
okay,
before prices really went crazy on those.
Okay, so you found the car. It's not advertised as a turbo. So you go to LA, you go to Beverly Hills, and you
so
check it out?
I flew down. I spent 6 hours. They wouldn't let me take it to do a private PPI. They said pre-purchase inspection. They said you can take it into the shop and lift it up and look at it, but we're not letting it. You can take it on a test drive, but we're not going to let you do a PPI. It's either take it or leave it. We have enough people waiting in line for it. You have to buy it tomorrow.
Really?
If you're going to buy it. This was the pitch that they gave me, and maybe it was a hard close, but knowing what I know about 911s and knowing the motor that I thought was in it, if it were indeed a turbo, and again, I did a VIN verification, it was a turbo, I knew my risks were relatively low. So I got it up on the lift. When I got down there, I could immediately see some body damage in the car. So that was kind of a bummer. It had been in a mild accident. I could see some respray, but it had an aftermarket suspension. It had Guabello wheels, which, were popular at one point, a 3-piece Guabello wheel, but now again, obviously everyone wants a stock wheel. So I used those things to beat the sales guys up and get the price to where I wanted it. Basically said, if you take cash right now, I'll walk out with it. And I got the keys and drove it back, which is a 5-hour drive in a turbo. It's probably a 7-hour drive in a regular car.
Okay, so did you feel like you were taking a risk then, though? Because they wouldn't let you do a PPI. Did they give you, is there any sort of, I don't know how it works in the US with those sort of dealers. Is there a sort of a warranty or not? Is there a statutory sort of warranty? No?
Yeah, definitely no warranty. It's buy at your own risk. And I had negotiated the price down to a point in which I felt like I couldn't lose, even if there was a major mechanical, which there was. Okay. And we can get into that, but I felt like there's little chance that I can lose on this car. This price is, the car had 22,000 original miles. Okay. It was a very low mileage example. And I was pretty pumped about that.
So you buy the car, you don't do a PPI, you take the chance. Right. It's a 996 turbo. It's got the Metzger engine. So, Metzger engines, as we always know, and, in owner stories we just had this week with Philip, Metzger engines are bulletproof. Yeah. So you have that sort of confidence from that. How is the drive, though, when you drive it back? Because you're driving it home, you're in your first Porsche. You've been thinking about this for some time. Was everything smooth? Incredible. Was it a great experience?
So the Guabello wheels with the race suspension that it had on it made for a very harsh ride for a long road trip from Southern California to Northern California. However, it was incredible to drive. I know it's impossible for me to get a ticket by talking on the podcast, but I exceeded the speed limit by more than double. It was my first time driving over 150 miles an hour in a car, and it was incredible. I had a blast. I had a total blast. Okay,
so you get it home and you think, okay, so what do you do? What's the first thing you do? I know the first thing I would do.
Well, I got it home and I looked at the rear tire and realized in one drive, because the alignment was off and I was pushing it hard, I had burned through one of my Pilot Sports on the back.
Oh, really?
The aftermarket wheels were larger than the stock wheel and wider. They were
rubbing.
like a 315.
Okay.
So it was $1,000 new tire immediately when I got home. So I get it home. It's the most expensive car I've ever bought. I'm telling my wife how this is a car. It's going to be great. I'm going to drive it, but also eventually make some money when I sell it and upgrade to something different. And then immediately I have to take it to the shop to replace a very expensive tire. And so I felt like a bit of a, wounded sheep coming into the house going, oh, I broke the car on the way home. But that wasn't even the major mechanical. That was not. That
wasn't?
Big thing.
Let's get into that. But what do you do with the wheels and the suspension then? You said it was a hard ride. It's got bigger tires. It's got bigger wheels. The tires are rubbing. It's going to be a problem long term. It seems like it's going to be a problem long term. Do you decide to I'm going to go back to the stock wheels? Do you change the suspension? Is that the first thing you think about doing?
Well, that was the plan. That was definitely the plan. One factor I left out, which was not in my intention to buy, was it was a Tiptronic. It was not a manual transmission. And I really prefer manual transmission cars, but this car, with the price I paid for it, I couldn't walk away from the deal. And I thought maybe I would come to enjoy the tip, and I didn't, to be honest. So the plan was to take it back to stock and drive it for a while, keep it as long as I could, and then at some point maybe upgrade to something newer. But it ended up I didn't change anything. I had planned on, after driving the car for a little while, that I really needed to find a manual. I needed to find a 6-speed. So I didn't change the suspension. I didn't change the wheels out. I just drove it for a while, just had some fun on the weekends. And just enjoyed the car. On Thanksgiving of that year, early in the morning, I picked up a close friend for a drive, and we went out to this road where the police are never, and so you can really push your car, and it's pretty straight. And we did 0 to 100 pushes just to really see how we could open it up. And I blew the hoses off the motor, which that Metzger engine has one weakness. They use an epoxy to attach the hose. And that epoxy with age can get brittle.
Oh, the coolant lines, yes, you mean? Oh, right. Hoses. Yeah. Steve had the same thing happen to his 997. It's the same running problem with the 997. Yeah.
That's right. So I blew those off, and it just created a huge, billowing, smoky, steamy mess. I turned the car off quickly, of course.
So you couldn't drive the car. It wasn't drivable, basically lost all the
Couldn't even
fluids.
drive it home. No, I had to pull it off to the side of the road Thanksgiving morning, call my wife to come pick me up, and then call a tow truck, which was, again, a big bummer.
Yeah, and to the listeners that don't know about that, if you're buying a 997 GT3 and 996, anything with the Metzger engine, right? Anything with the Metzger, you have to get the coolant lines pinned, because the coolant lines, the glue goes. Steve had that problem, and he's spoken about it on the podcast, where he was lucky enough that he was close enough to Autohouse Hamilton, where we take it in Sydney, and he could just get back there, because it just started, but it didn't completely, it didn't completely blow off. But it's a pretty bad thing to happen, and it doesn't seem to be that publicized. I don't seem to see it on many forums. I mean, when Steve told me, I found it, but it's not like it's not like the IMS where it's everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And the crazy thing is, I called Porsche Walnut Creek here in the Bay Area and said, hey, I had this issue. The car is in front of my house, but I can't drive it. Oh, they said, okay, bring it in. We have to drop the motor and we'll re-epoxy it. And I said, wait a second. You're just going to put the same glue back on it? Yeah, and they said, oh yeah, that's the factory fix. And so that led me on a journey, and I found Sharkworks here in the Bay Area, and they're phenomenal. And they did the hose pinning and a couple other upgrades while they were in there. But it was an expensive.
I'm envious, Devan, that you're so close to Sharkworks. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? So you got that temptation there all the time, especially if you eventually buy a GT3. There is a big temptation there with what they do. Yeah. Okay, so you've got the taste, right? It's not a manual. It's a turbo, though. It's a Metzger. Yes. Everyone loves the turbo. Everyone loves the Metzger. It's a Tiptronic. Some people like, some people don't like. Everyone prefers the manual. So you've got the taste for the Porsche. You've got the taste for the 911. How long do you keep that car for?
That car was about 2 years, and then I started toying with the idea of letting it go. So I popped it on the list, and immediately got a hit from somebody who was interested in looking at it. I pull up to this showing appointment, and the gentleman pulls up in a 997 4S to look at the car. And I'm like, man, I love your car. It's beautiful. And he had some modifications done to the exhaust, so it sounded incredible as it pulled in. And he goes, well, I really like your car. And I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you take my turbo home and I'll take the 4S home and we'll do just an overnight test drive and we'll meet back here today. Cause I've never driven a manual 4S, a 997 4S, and I'd love to. And he said, well, I've been looking for a turbo for a long time. So we did. We exchanged keys. I drove his car home. He drove my car home. And then we met back up the next day at the same coffee shop and discussed a trade, which ended up happening.
So that's how you came across your second 911, just like that?
Correct. Just like
Perfect.
that. So it ends up so it was a 2007 in seal, or what was it? Arctic gray. It's the lightest gray. My turbo was a seal gray, the darker gray. And then this was the lighter gray, with a fab speed exhaust, an ECU remap, stock exhaust. Obviously it had, basically most of the options. It wasn't carbon on the interior, but full leather. And I'm trying to remember some of the other options off the top of my head, but a well-optioned car nonetheless, really well taken care of. It had about double the mileage that the turbo did. And so I managed to negotiate a cash payment in my direction as well on top of the trade, which at the time felt like an exceptional deal to me.
Okay, so what year was this, Devan?
This 997 was a 2007.
And you traded this in what year? How long ago?
Oh, this would have been 2016 then, because it was about 2 years after I bought the turbo.
Okay, so 2016, and the turbo was still worth more than the 4S, the 997.
I mean, that was he wanted to do a straight across swap, which the Kelly Blue Book was about even, but
right.
I wasn't that interested in a straight across trade, because whenever you're, doing car deals, if somebody's more interested in your car, maybe it's a good idea to get paid for that. And so I could sense that he really had to have that turbo,
okay,
because it was so low mileage. And I said, well, I'd like some, cash on top, so I can justify the trade to my wife rather than just selling it, which, as we all know, happy wife, happy life. So
Absolutely.
If I came home with cash and a car, it was a win.
So did you do a PPI on this one, or you just trusted
I did. Yes, okay. I did. And he did as well on mine. His mechanic found the stuff that I had found at the dealer, the body work that had been done and some of the aftermarket parts. His mechanic actually suggested against the trade, and he told me that. He said, my mechanic doesn't like it. He thinks it's set up too much as a race car, okay, but I really like it because it's set up that way. And my mechanic loved his car and said, this car is really well cared for. It's in beautiful shape. A couple things, that we did, like brakes and some tires, but it was pretty well sorted. So,
okay, so you're into your second 911 already. You've got the Carrera 4S. I like the Carrera 4S. I have friends who have the Carrera 4S in London. Nick's got one, 997.
Great car.
We all like the comparison between different generations. Yeah. You know what I mean? And some of us get to experience it. Some of us don't. I haven't yet to experience anything but a 997 as an ownership proposition. So you've had the 996. It was a Tiptronic, and then you go into the 997. What was the first thing you thought or you noticed that was different? Apart from the manual transmission. So if I can be honest, the turbo is too much car. It scared me. I have a hard time with self-control, and I really like that pedal to go all the way down when I get on the highway and I'm going for fun. And so let's say you're just going for a slow speed on an on-ramp, and California has a lot of these nice curved, very smooth on-ramps. And so there's a few in the area that on my loop, which I do out through the mountains with or through the hills, they're not really mountains, through the hills and then on some freeway to really get some high speed, that turbo would scare basically everyone and everyone in it. My wife hardly would drive in it. She probably only sat in it twice. Okay.
She would always complain if we were going to take it that it was just too harsh, but also scary. And so to me, the biggest difference in going to the naturally aspirated car was a far more even power band, obviously. I really liked that. I liked the delivery of power. It felt more connected. The 996 felt a little more subdued, even though it had that race suspension. Whether it's the interior, whether it's the connection to the road, I just didn't feel as connected, and I felt more scared. Like that car is going to kill me someday as I'm getting on the freeway at 170 when I should only be doing 110. There's just not enough track to be up that fast. That car's so fast.
And also, you've gone from the turbo, which is a rear-wheel drive, and you've gone to a 4S. Right. Did you feel any difference?
No, the turbo was all-wheel. Oh,
the turbo's all-wheel. Sorry, it is too. Sorry. Yeah. You're right. Yep. Yeah.
And I like the all-wheel drive platform. I thought it was fun. I started really doing hard driving in the 4S. I felt more comfortable in it. I signed up for some Porsche club events and did some autocross and some track days. And really got to know the car well and pushed the car very hard and felt like it was more of a sports car and less of just a supercar. I mean, the turbo for me, just too much. I didn't need that much power.
It's interesting, the Fab Speed, as you said, it had a Fab Speed exhaust, right? Fab Speed seems to be quite a popular option on 911s, on 997s and 996s. I didn't realize they were so popular, actually. Because when I was looking for them, they didn't really come up that much. I mean, I went with a Fister mod, of course. How was the sound of the Fab Speed?
It was incredible. I mean, nobody had heard a 911 like this in my group of car friends. And so, when I pull in, people thought it was like it had a Ferrari motor in it or something. I mean, it was incredibly loud and incredibly high pitched compared to the standard note that you hear. And I had such a blast in that car. Even if you're only doing, 45 miles an hour cruising, you put it in third gear and just listen to that, 3,000 RPM note. It was incredible. I loved it so much for that sound and that connection that felt raw, which is what led me, obviously, I think, to my next 911 was really seeking that raw connection. I cared less about the technology. What I enjoyed when I would do track days in the 997 is turning everything off. Running it as base level as you can.
Yes.
That you can't turn ABS off, but basically being able to drive it at its most pure. And so that's, the Fab Speed with the ECU remap, it really felt sporty.
So the ECU remap is part of the Fab Speed package, is it?
It wasn't, I don't believe, but the gentleman who owned the car, he did the Fab Speed and the ECU remap at the same independent shop up in Marin County. And I guess they specialize in some tuning. I can't recall the name of the shop, but my understanding, and I actually spoke with the independent who did the work, is that it changed the throttle response a bit and pushed a little more torque into the opening range of the motor.
Okay.
And you could feel it. I drove a friend's 997 4S that didn't have Fab Speed and ECU map, and it was not nearly as playful.
Right. So how long did you own that car for, Devan?
So that was another 2 years, and in about 2014. So I took it to Thunder Hill a few times, a raceway up here, and really, I just felt like I was having a blast with it. But as a daily driver in my business, I need to carry a lot of clothing. I'm a clothing designer, and so I couldn't really drive it to many meetings. I did take it to meetings, but not as many as I would have preferred. And my business was growing. My family was growing. I had another child, and felt like I needed some cash to build out a retail store that we were opening. So I unfortunately sold the car. Obviously did well on the sale. The price that I received was higher than I expected. But just felt crushed to have to sell a 911, but you have to put the family in the business first at that phase.
So what did you replace it with? What did you replace the 911 with?
I didn't replace it for a while. No, I kind of went to family cars and started saving money to really build the business and buy our home here. And so I drove a very boring couple cars after that and just missed having a fun car for quite a while. And again, this whole time I'm meeting up with my friend who's this 911 junkie and someone who was one of my closest friends and mentors. And so we're having beers, we're talking about the cars. We were actually driving our cars at the same time. Okay. So we'd be meeting up and doing drives and, racing and stuff and doing go-kart races, even driving our fun cars to the go-kart races to race each other. So it was just a kind of a fun continuation of the dialogue, even though I didn't have a fun car. We just kept talking about them and what I was going to do next.
Okay, let's get into your current cars. So you've had two water-cooled. Yeah. You've had the 996 generation, you've had the Turbo, you've had the Metzger, you've had the Carrera 4S, 911s that people are searching out. And then you think, okay, I want to go classic. I want to go air-cooled.
Well, to be honest, it was less planned than that. To be honest, I had continually... So my friend and I, who had the car that I currently own, he had kind of abandoned it, if I can use that term. It was in his garage. It hadn't been started in 7 years. The tires were flat. It was covered in boxes. And whenever I would go over to his place, we'd go down and look at it. And I'd be like, man, when are you going to let me buy this and fix this up and get it back on the road? And he's, a busy guy. He kept saying, well, one of these days we'll do the deal. One of these days we'll figure out how to get it out of the garage, because he had lived in a garage where the slope was so steep, in the Bay Area. The garage slope sometimes from, a flat garage to a driveway can be so steep that a low car plus a car that has been sitting, so it's on flat tires, it's just really hard to get out of the garage. When it wasn't running, he kept saying, I don't even know how to get it out of here. We're going to have to get a specialized tow truck. Okay. It's going to be hard to get it out.
But this is a guy you're meeting for beers. This is a guy you're talking about the cars with. The car was working at that point. He was driving the car.
No, he wasn't driving it. No, he was driving a different car. He even though was a 911 obsessed guy, he also loved an M3, and so he was driving an M3 that we actually would drive in together. He let me drive it. Very connected car, but he was not driving a 911 at that point. Not this 911. I'd actually had never seen it driven until I pulled it out of the garage. No, I'd never seen it run or start.
These sort of stories always interest me. So this is because he didn't have the time to do the work on it, or he didn't want to sell it, but he didn't want to do the work. Is that kind of how
Correct.
It was?
A nostalgic car for him. He was a really amazing person. Unfortunately, he's passed away.
Right.
But he was obsessed with cars and motorcycles, and was a very prominent person in his industry, and did a lot of travel. Just made a huge impact for humanity, and did some really big things that forced him to be away from some of the hobbies that I think he really loved, which 911. This 911 was definitely one of those. He had done a lot of the work on the car himself, which is one of the reasons it wasn't running, because he had put a larger motor in the car. I didn't know this at the time. When I bought the car, I didn't know anything about it other than the shell and the year, but I didn't know anything about the car.
Okay. So how did you acquire the car then? Did he decide to let it go, or how did the car come about?
Well, so he passed away in a motorcycle accident commuting home from work.
Oh, really?
In a real tragedy. And about 6 months to a year later, I'm good friends with his widow as well, and I had inquired on the car and just said, hey, the gentleman and I had talked a lot about this car, and if it's possible, I'd love to buy it from the estate. Right. It's very sentimental to me. He was very important to me, and helped me with my business in many ways. And so I kind of reached out to her and said, hey, if you're ever ready to get rid of it, please let me know. And at one point, she was ready to move the car. I was driving at the time that we spoke on the phone, and she basically said, okay, I'm ready to let it go. Let's just move it. And I said, well, I don't even know anything about it. But I've done some research on what these go for, and there's a really broad range.
Yes.
And so we kind of negotiated a price sight unseen. I mean, I hadn't done, again, any inspections, I looked at it underneath the stuff that was in it and on it, but I didn't know much about it. I knew there was a giant puddle of oil underneath the car, but I didn't know much about it. We negotiated a price. I called my independent mechanic and said, hey, I don't know how to get this car out of this garage, because the wheels have actually been flattened. They were aftermarket Fuchs wheels, and they were cheap. And so they were actually flat spots on the wheels. Not only was the tire flat, but the wheel had actually had a flat spot. And so he sent his favorite tow truck driver out there. I met at the property and tried to make it easy on my friend to obviously remove the car and relieve this from her.
Before we go into that side of it, tell the listeners, so what year is this car? Tell the listeners what you know about the car now, and what it was, or what it is.
At the point in which I bought it, I knew it was a 1969 911T.
Okay, beautiful.
Long hood T. And in relatively rough shape, if I'm speaking in terms of buying these cars. I mean, the paint, it was a tangerine orange, and you could tell that it was, because the paint that they had painted over it at one point was black, but there were spots where you could see tangerine orange through the black paint.
I find that really interesting what you just said, because it seems like a lot of 66 to 69 911s were bright colors. And it seems like there was a trend in that time, or whatever time it was. I don't know, maybe you can relate this back to fashion, but there's a time where everyone painted them black. They just got rid of the color, didn't they? And it's quite bizarre.
It makes total sense when you think about the culture in fashion, at least in the late 60s, early 70s, was very colorful.
Yeah.
And the 911, especially if you you spec'd it with a bright color, was definitely a look at me car, a have fun car. Yeah. This is the 70s. So, early, late 60s, early 70s. And then I think this got painted in the 90s, when obviously black cars really, and like this subtle kind of toned down look. And the funny thing is, my friend who owned the car, he never wanted to paint it back to tangerine orange. He wanted to keep it black. He wanted to repaint it again in black. And we used to talk about this over beers. He would say, well, if you buy the car, I would prefer you not to paint it tangerine orange. And I would argue with them and say, you're crazy.
No. Yeah,
you're
exactly.
Crazy. It's got to be tangerine orange. It's got to be.
So the car's in his garage in the Bay Area. It's got a steep driveway. You get the truck there. You get it on the truck. What do you do? Where do you take it?
We go straight to the independent. It goes straight to the shop, and we put it up on a lift immediately. So I had paid for the car. Now it was time to take a look at the car and see what I was in for. I knew it was going to be a lot of rebuild work, but I didn't know how bad. And we get the car up on the lift, and we discover it's got a 3-liter motor. Okay. So it's a, definitely more of an outlaw build. It's got a 3-liter motor with PMO carbs, which were not tuned. They did not function. So we also had a rotted fuel system. We had an electrical system that did not function. The car would not start. Once we replaced the fuel system, the electrical system was still very faulty and had several shorts. So we had to create a new wiring harness. We replaced the fuel system. Okay. And we just basically started overhauling this car to get it running.
How do you do that? Do you have a procedure to do that? Like when you design something, are you thinking, okay, I'm going to have this list. I'm going to go through these things in the right order to get to the final result? Do you have a certain order that you want to do them in? You know what I mean? Like from the pattern to the production, to the sample, production sample, production sort of thing. Do you have that same sort of process when you're thinking about this car?
Michael, I wish I had connected the dots on my logical brain from my clothing production side to cars, because I was just so excited about this car and I was throwing money at it, saying, okay, I just want it to run. I want to drive it, please. I'm just ready to drive it.
So it quickly.
I didn't say quickly. I said, do it right, but I want this car to run, and I know it's going to be expensive. I don't want to remove the motor and rebuild the motor. We ended up doing several tests and realized that the motor didn't need a rebuild, but could use one eventually. It's not, brand new. We could have upgraded the suspension, but it had an Elephant Racing suspension kit already on it.
Nice.
It had new Coney shocks.
Okay.
So I basically said, to my independent mechanic, because a lot of this work was over my head, creating a wiring harness for a Resto Mod or Outlaw 69 911 is not something I know how to do. So I begged my independent, who was phenomenal, to just kind of get this car back on the road in a way that's safe, but also going to last me for a while until I can do the paint and body, which I still have yet to do. But so we first tackled mechanical systems is the answer to that.
Classic cars, I had that, we were chatting about that, I think, in the podcast before I went on the 2-week break when I went to Dubai. Mm-hmm. And I was quite surprised by that post that I came across where they were saying it's like 300,000, 300,000 if you take it to Porsche Classic to get your 300,000-ish upwards. Which I find... I mean, I guess I understand it, but it kind of still shocks me.
No, it's crazy. You shouldn't understand it. No one should understand.
When you started, Devan, did you limit yourself? Did you have a ceiling? Did you think, okay, I'm going to spend 100,000, 150,000, or?
I was thinking in my mind, we're going to spend 20 grand to get this car running. That's what I was thinking. We more than doubled that just to get it running.
Okay.
Even just tuning the carbs. I remember the bill when that came. And we rejetted and tuned the carbs, and I about had a heart attack. I mean, I'd rebuilt carbs in my life on 4 different cars, and to get that bill with that hours logged, and I called the mechanic and said, "How is this possible? How could this be possible?" And he said, "Well, you said you wanted to keep it carbureted," because his suggestion was to take the 3-liter back fuel injected. But again, I love the rawness.
Yes.
The gentleman I bought the car from had this idea for this car, and though I didn't want to keep it black, I really wanted to honor his idea, which was this is going to be a track-oriented, daily driver, fun 911. It's not going back to stock. It's carbureted, but it's got the 3-liter. It's got S-cams. He had done certain things for a reason, and I wanted to honor that.
Okay, so What have you done so far then? What stage are you up to? I mean, you haven't done you haven't changed the color yet, right? You're still with the black?
Correct. We're basically, everything is done other than interior and body paint. We've basically overhauled all the other mechanical systems. Oh, the other spec I forgot to mention about the car. So it's a 69 911T with a comfort package, or factory S package as some people call it, and a factory sunroof. So
what was the comfort S pack? What's the comfort package? I don't know what that is.
So the comfort package you could order on the T, and it basically gave you all the S options other than the drivetrain.
Okay.
So fog lamps, the Fuchs wheels,
better trim inside as well.
The trim, the gold lettering on the back of the car, and so it had this kind of interesting build. I have gotten the sunroof to work, even though we haven't taken it completely apart. The sunroof is now working, which is kind of fun. My kids love that when we take a ride. So it's basically ready for paint and body, and I'm now, after recovering from a huge pandemic hangover that fashion producers all over the world took, I'm approaching the phase in which I've saved up enough to start that process of doing paint and body.
What about the interior though? Because the interior is something that, I find when I eventually get a 912 I love a 911T or a 911S, but the interior is always something I really love. And I love what David, who's been on Owner Stories before, David in New Zealand, did with the all those fabrics and the seats and the racing seats.
His is beautiful.
His is beautiful. Like that interior to me is just perfect. That's what I like.
Yes.
But then also there's Stephen in Sydney who's got the 912 hot rod that he's getting fixed up. I don't know if you heard that episode. And his interior is again slightly different. For me, I like David's interior. I like that sort of, that raw natural fabrics with the tan leather, and he spent a lot of time on it. Is that something you're looking forward to doing, to getting that interior just right, or are you going to keep it period? You're going to make it as it was stock?
I'm not going to keep it period. So the car, I want to pay tribute to my friend who I acquired the car from. He was very into tweed jackets. I had made him several tweed jackets.
Okay. That's great.
And so we're going to use some menswear fabric, some heavy Harris tweed that we actually make sport coats from for interior accents. We're going to reupholster the seats with the inserts in the seats and then pick a new leather color to match. And then we'll do some door cards with that. And then I have some creative ideas for the dash where my tailoring staff's actually going to create some pieces that my idea would be to have them be interchangeable. And so we can technically change those insert colors, even reupholster the seats maybe in 5 years with a different tweed as I decide, I'm kind of over that and I want to change the whole look of the car. Because the objective of the car, I'll take that back to tangerine orange. I'm trying to find a good painter to do some ghosting for me. And I want to do a ghost houndstooth racing stripe. So like tiny little puppy teeth or like houndstooth that are ghosted down the side of the car.
Okay. At what part? What side of the car? Whereabouts?
I'd like it to be like down the front left side. No, down the front. Like so, instead of the classic racing stripe, so it'll be like offset off the driver down the front left, and maybe like 6 to 8 inches wide and ghosted on there. So you really don't see it, but you see it. The idea being again to tie in the menswear with the car, so we can take it to shows and our clients. I have a lot of clients who are obsessed with Porsche. So to be able to have this be a really unique build, but also one that's not so crazy that if for whatever reason, I never plan to sell this car, but if for whatever reason I had to, I don't want the build to be so unique that no one would ever touch it. Right. But I do want it to be relatively unique.
What do you think of those 911s that have been done by that designer that I can never pronounce the name, Amy Leon Dore or whatever it's called? Have you seen those?
Oh, yes, I have. I like those. They're beautiful.
Because they've done two, right? There's been two that's been done.
Yeah. Again, I think you walk a close line of being so unique that you're going to alienate some buyers, but that's okay because that's, to me, art is a personal expression. And these are works of art. These 911s of almost any generation. I I just think they're all works of art. And so I don't know that I'm going to go, create a painting on the outside of the car, but little details that,
how do you,
that you can appreciate.
How are you going to do the interior though? Because you're thinking about the orange exterior, right? You're going to do the interior to match the orange exterior, or you're going to get the exterior painted first before you do the interior?
So, my plan was to obviously have the exterior painted. I want to do a lot of the disassembly myself so I could see, where the pieces go and how we could add accents tastefully. I don't want it to be over patterned, right? I do like the way leather looks and feel like it should have some leather in there. But, my interior car design expertise are very limited. So I will be probably doing a process of, does this work, trying it, and then maybe taking it back out. So I plan to have it painted first. It's going to come back to the garage here. I have a home workshop for my business and loads of fabric. And then I just plan on pulling fabric out, ordering pieces, and actually putting it in the car and seeing, myself before it goes on the seats. What does this look like? What does this feel like in here? And do I like it? Is this an environment I'm going to want to spend time in?
And I bet you have a great choice of paint shops where you are in California too, in the Bay Area. There's great places nearby, right? I
do. Yeah, I do. And I've been in touch with a few. I've been in touch with a few in LA, and of course, some of the best builders, Porsche restorers in the world are along the West Coast, whether they're in Washington or LA, or there's a few here in the Bay Area. What I find is it just seems crazy what, you get quoted a price, and like my first over the phone quote gave me a heart attack for just paint and body. I was like, you got to be kidding. Is that a new car? Are you going to give me a new car, or is this the same car? Because there's like basically no rust on my car.
I was going to ask you that actually. Is there going to be any surprises? Because people, when they get their car painted and the panels start coming off, they start to see the filler and they start to see the rust that they didn't realize was there. So your body's
there's
okay?
There's a few spots. There's like some surface rust along the driver's side roof rail. And then the front fender had been in an accident, and I can tell that there's some filler work, and it's a poor filler job. We'll probably end up flaring the fenders. I need some more rubber in the back. It's got that 3-liter motor in it, and it's a terrifyingly fast car for how light it is. It's 2,800 pounds, 2,380, 2,400 pounds, I think.
So what did you do with the wheels? What did you change the wheels to? Did you get original Fuchs or did you get replicas? How did you work that one out?
By the time it was wheel time, my business had taken, so it sat in the workshop where the mechanic was redoing all these systems. I didn't actually get to bring it home until the pandemic had hit. And that's when I went to pick it up. The pandemic was hitting. I was actually going to roll it from the mechanic shop straight to paint and body, but my projection of where this virus was going to take my business was that it would really impact us. And so I stopped all spending on the car. I went and picked it up. It was running and driving. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to bring it home and drive it throughout the pandemic. I'm not going to do paint and body and wheels, and I'm just going to run it. And so it had these, the replica Fuchs on it. And my mechanic said, look, they're fine. I've resealed the tires. We bought new tires, obviously. He said, they're holding air. They're fine. Just drive it. There's a flat spot on all 4 wheels, but just drive it. It'll be fine. It wasn't fine, not at all. I was getting flat tires often and using my air compressor. And finally, I said, okay, I know I'm tight on cash, but I can buy a new set of replica wheels. And so I bought a new set of replica wheels painted in black, which I know is incorrect for the 69, but with the car black, I felt like it would be fun. Plus, what we're going to do is body match that set. We're going to get a original set of Fuchs, obviously with a wider rear wheel, so I can put some bigger rubber on it.
Yes.
But this disposable set of fake Fuchs, as I'll call them, I'm going to body match the paint on those, so I can change the look of the car if I feel like it.
Good idea.
I haven't seen a body matched paint on a 69 Tangerine before, and I think it would be kind of cool to have that body matched insert on the wheel.
Yeah, I love the Tangerine. Tangerine's such a great color in that 69, and I love the 69 as well. 69 and a 912 or 69 and a 911, being the best year in my opinion. So,
absolutely.
Okay, so let's just go back because you said the 996 the turbo was a little bit hard to handle, and then you go into the 4S. It's a bit more comfortable. It's a bit more easy to drive. The 911T. With a hot rod, how safe do you feel, and how in control of that car do you feel?
Well, so the first drive in it, and I remember this vividly. The mechanical work wasn't entirely done, but I was in to see the car often during the process of getting it running, and my mechanic had texted me and said, "Hey, it's ready for a drive. You can't take it far, but it's ready for a drive." And so I get in the car, and he goes, "Okay, please don't kill yourself. This is a very lightweight car, and I haven't flushed the brakes. They work, but they're touchy. So please don't kill yourself. Stay in first gear, maybe second gear, and just go around the office park where his shop was." He said, "Please don't take it out." And immediately, I get in the car, I drive it around this lap, and I wasn't on it at all, right? I kept it really mild, and I pull back in, and he comes up to the window, and he goes, "I heard you the whole way. You didn't push it hard enough." And I said, "Well, you scared me. You told me not to kill myself." And he goes, no, actually have fun driving it. You'll be fine. Just don't go out of third gear and don't leave the office park. And so the second lap around, I really did push it and had quite a bit of fun. And yes, you do feel a much more connected driving experience in that car than any of the other cars I've ever driven in my life, obviously. But obviously the two other 911s were far more modern and heavier cars.
Yes.
So you feel this connection. The weight to horsepower ratio and the small rubber I currently have on it does make it a bit scary, especially in corners. I'm conservative in corners. I don't push the throttle, too hard in a tight corner because I'd probably lose the rear end. But it's a great driver. It's a great experience. My kids and I and my wife will take it out and do a 15, 20-minute loop with some nice turns, and I'll push it. I don't go too far into the red line, but I'll push it.
Are you still tweaking the setup though? Are you still tweaking the suspension and stuff like that? Or is it pretty much okay?
The suspension's excellent. It's really well sorted. It has a polyurethane rear bushing that's pretty squeaky when it's cold. That Elephant Racing rear bushing is pretty squeaky, which I don't love. And I may go back to something that's a little more contemporary, but it's very well planted. And in fact, on a drive recently, I have a neighbor who has a 3.2 Cabrio. I think it's a 79 or 81, something like this. Okay. And we did a drive with our families in the car. Well, half of my family and half of his family, my kids basically and his kids. And he's a police officer. So we had basically pulled up at a stoplight together on a road, and just perfect timing, right? The stoplight goes red. The two of us, we had already done the spirited drive through the windies, and the two of us pull up next to each other, and he starts revving his, and he's got the G50, and I'm thinking, man, there's no way I'm keeping up with this guy. And I'm revving mine up, and we tear off, and we get up to maybe, 80 miles an hour. And I was like maybe 2 car lengths ahead of him until about 60 miles per hour. And then, his torque started to take me over, but I was still feeling like, wow, this little car is faster than I thought. I thought he'd blow my doors off, and I didn't even get near the red line, and I was far ahead of him, up to about 60, 65 miles an hour. So it's a fun little car. It's really fun.
It's a 5-speed, Devan?
Yes, it's a 5-speed.
5-speed dogleg. Yep.
Yeah, it's a 5-speed. It's a fun transmission. That I've driven a lot of manual transmissions, from American cars to Japanese cars to obviously this Porsche, and I love the way it feels. I love the connection to the car that you feel. It's an experience that I wish everyone could have, but I don't want them to have it in my car. So I love telling my friends, like, you have to try one, but don't try mine, please.
So when will it all be finished, you think? How long you think before it comes to completion? Interior, paintwork? That's such a great question, Michael, and I wish I knew that. So it sits in my garage under a cover next to my gym. I built a gym during the pandemic in my garage with the bench press and the squat rack and all this. Right. And I stare at the car every day during my workout, and it brings me so much joy, even underneath the cover, to look at it and its shape. And I just cannot wait to do the paint and body, but I have to make sure my family's future is secure first. So I anticipate maybe we have a year. There's no rush. No, there's no rush, because it's you're having fun with it. You can drive it. You're enjoying it. Whether it's in the garage or it's on the road, you're enjoying it. So there's not really any rush, and that's the whole fun of it, isn't it? The time that you're taking to get it, perfect.
Yeah, and that comfort package, which it came from stock, has the S brakes. I forgot to mention that. So it has pretty pretty well sorted brakes. Now I want to upgrade the braking system further, but that's another, $7,000 to $10,000 upgrade. So when I've kind of put together my punch list of projects,
right.
Obviously paint and body would produce right now my next level of joy from the car. Cause then we can take it to a car show and not be, I'm embarrassed by it. I mean, most people love it. We get so many comments on the car, but as a perfectionist, I see the orange flecking on the paint on the front, the front lip, and I'm like, that bugs me. And I see the little like surface rust on the roof rail. And so I don't ever take it to a show. I just drive it to the show and then walk into the show. But as soon as I can get that sorted, I really want to show it off.
I think, I love black 911s. I like the black. I still think black, classic 911s are great, but in that tangerine,
right.
In those tangerine,
right.
in the oranges, in the blues, in the, the python green, those colors
yes.
now, they're just, that python green color. I saw one, there's one for sale at European Collectibles. There's a python green one for about 99,000, I think. It's quite reasonably low.
That's
for a
quite cheap.
911T. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with it.
Yeah.
It came up the other day, but it's in python green. I thought, man, that's a great color.
Wow.
That's a great color.
Yeah, it's so funny. So in listening to owner stories all these weeks and months, I often think to myself, I think you've asked this question before, would you, because some of these guys are further along in their restorations, would you have bought a fully restored car or done this again? And I'm kind of in that position now. If this car didn't have the sentimental attachment for me that it does, which it is one of my most prized items. It is very, very sentimental to me because of who it belonged to and how important he was to me. If it wasn't that car, I would have much preferred to buy someone else's finished project, mostly because of the emotional drama to me that happens when it's gone. And I get a call or an email about whatever the problem is that we now have to sort.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh no, that's a new thing. Oh no, like the fuel system's corroded and we have to replace it all. And the batteries and the battery well, and this and that. And that drama for me, that was one of the things I didn't love. I rather would have said, and I didn't do this. If I would have said to my mechanic, okay, here's X amount of money, let's spend it as you see fit up until this point, and then call me on every item. But getting called often and then getting these emails often, it was like a roller coaster of success. Like, oh, it's firing up today. And then I get a video of it firing up. And then the next day, it's not working anymore. It won't fire up. I don't know what's going on.
But it's the story behind it. Like you said, it's that story. It's your friend. It's talking about this car, the car that he didn't want to sell to you, that he was just keeping in his garage, Devan. And now that, and it's a sad part of the story, but you now have that car. And I think that's,
right.
It must make you smile. You know what I mean? When you see it, it must make you smile. And you think about those stories and you think about him, and, that's what's great about it. And the money, money's important, but it's not that important.
It's not that important. Yeah. That's 100% the truth. And the wild thing is when I drive it, I feel him, whether it's him spiritually or just him mechanically, because so much of him is in that car and what he wanted from that car. And I knew him so well that, for example, when that bushing squeaks and my daughter goes, Daddy, why is the car squeaking? I chuckle in my head and go, that's because John wanted this to be a track car. This has track car suspension.
Yeah.
That's because my friend really wanted this. And that's what's special to me. It makes me smile. I get to drive it and experience that. And that, I think, encapsulates what 911, for me, what Porsche is about for most people. It's about not just how beautiful the mechanical systems are, how exquisite the finishing is. It's about the experience of driving it, how you feel when you drive it.
Yeah, it's the experience of driving it. It's the story behind it as well. It's the previous owners and the story. If you have that story and the people that have owned it before, people that search out the previous owners of their car. I know someone I was talking to, I can't remember who it was, and they were trying to find all the owners of the car that they had of the classic 911. They just wanted to know everyone down the line. So those sort of things, even if it's the son or the grandson or whatever, they still find out the connection. And I think that's a great thing to do. And share that with those people too, because it's someone in their family that owned the car, which is a really good thing.
And that's my hope for this car, is that it stays in my family and passes to one of my two children whoever's a petrol head. My son currently, my 9-year-old and I like to do a lot of the mechanical work. We are halfway through an oil change of our own, and I'll say halfway because I have figured, Well, I had figured that he had changed the oil filter size to match the motor. I had figured when he put the 3-liter in, he had changed the oil tank and filter attachment so it would use a 3-liter filter.
Right.
So when I ordered the components for the oil change, because my son and I have been doing a lot of work on all of our cars, we changed the brakes on my Alfa Romero the other day, and we do tire rotation on the Porsche. We just had some fun, and so he goes, "Oh, I want to do an oil change. That'd be fun." So I ordered up all the parts, Pelican parts, and I get the filter size in for a 3-liter 911. We get the oil drained out of the car, and I'm like all sweaty. I'm covered in oil. It's a whole mess. And I grab the 3-liter filter. I go to screw it on, and it's the wrong size. I'm like, no. And I should have just checked. It says on the filter. I didn't check. And then, of course, I read the filter. I look it up on Pelican Parts, and he still had the, the 69 911 size oil filter in it.
I want to ask you a question, actually, because you said the brakes weren't up to speed. The brakes weren't. You were thinking about doing the brakes, and they're going to cost you $7,000. Yes. What brakes do you put on to fit the wheel? What is the upgrade?
There's a couple different that guys will do. I'm going to widen my fender and my front fender and rear wheel. I don't know how much I'll go big on the front fender, whether they'll just roll the lip or whether we'll actually put a new fender on. Right. But there's a Boxster brake you can put on there. That there's a kit that is sold. I'm trying to think who I was just looking at. Maybe if it's Elephant Racing that sells the full kit. Okay. That it comes with all the components that you can install it yourself. Or there's another, I think it's one of the brakes off a 964 kit that they also make. It's on their website as an option. I really like the way the Boxster brake looks. I've seen it on a Resto Mod or an Outlaw build like this, and I really love the whole fit and finish. It looked beautiful on the car. So the current brakes are fine. You can just I can just see myself taking this, and I'm ready to take it on the track. I would really like to do so, but I can see being a little under braked coming into some of the steeper turns and feeling a bit scared.
So you want to take it on the track though before you get the paint job done, right? You don't want to do it.
Yes.
That's the
I'll
thing.
Do that. I mean, really? Honestly, I'm going to do it when the paint job's on it.
Get that patina started.
To be clear, these cars were meant to be driven. Yeah, they're meant to be driven. And yes, it will go to some fun car shows, but I'm not building a concourse car. It's not going to go down to Monterey. I'm building a fun car that I'm going to drive. And track days or something. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I really love adrenaline. And so I can't wait to push this car. Fantastic. It's so raw. I just cannot wait to see what it can do. That 997 at Thunder Hill, I had no idea what that car could do until I put it on a track. And then I was like, whoa, this is a whole different car than I thought it was on the road. So I can't wait to do it. But I do want to do more track time before the paint and body goes on. It just depends on, once the schedule with COVID and the Thunder Hill Raceway opens up, and that's my favorite course up here because there's less barriers for you to hit. Right. Laguna Seca, which is a very well-known racetrack, has a few walls that some of my clients have actually rammed their cars into.
It's a trickier track, isn't it? Laguna Seca is a trickier.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that corkscrew is insane.
Yeah, the corkscrew. I was going to say that. Yeah. So
it's crazy.
You just, we're running out of time, but you said you had an Alfa as well. Do you have an old Alfa or a new Alfa?
No, I have a new Alfa. It's a Stelvio TI, and I had it kind of special ordered as my daily driver. So it's a fun little car. We actually have a car problem around here. We also have a supercharged Range Rover and a big truck. I like a man truck. I've got an F-150, and I just I have all sorts of cars. Wow. I mean, I move stuff. I have a house up in Tahoe, so I'm moving stuff around. I ride bikes, and so. I felt like I needed a truck, and then my wife, I wanted her to have a big car, and this Range Rover is a wonderful highway cruiser. And so I actually was hoping to perhaps purchase Brian's cab and have her sell her Range Rover and then drive the cab as her daily driver, because it's a tip and she doesn't drive a manual. And so I was thinking this could be a great thing. It didn't work out, but.
So what else are you looking for then? Are you looking for anything else before we get onto your favorite drives? What else are you, what else are you looking for? Is there anything else? So you got the T? Is there another 911?
Yes. It's another 911. It's probably something unique. My priority is still to probably park capital in the T's restoration. But if the right car comes along, like, potentially Brian's may have been, or I have another client. I really love being connected to the people that I buy the cars from. And I have another customer who has a beautiful 996 4S cab in like a navy blue. I don't know what the factory color is called, but with a tan interior, and it is exquisite. It is in great shape. It's a 6-speed, and he's really taking good care of it. That might become available in the next few years. He's thinking about upgrading. So that could be a really fun car just for wine country visits. Yeah. We do a lot of, driving for long. The benefit that the T has, right, is the short drives are really fun. I don't know yet. I have not taken it on these drives yet, but a drive up to wine country from my house is an hour and a half. I don't know yet how that drive would be with, two little people in the back and my spouse. I know with a 996, because I've owned them before, very comfortable on the highway. The T feels like a micro car, and
I know it's so small, isn't it? Yeah,
it's incredible.
When you park it next to your F-150, it must look like a little baby's car.
It does, and when you pull up to stoplights, California is very different than many places in the world. I realize this. There are a lot of big cars here, so I pull up next to an SUV, and my head is at the top of the wheel to like an average car. Yeah, it's crazy. It's
in
crazy.
The Middle East as well. There's quite a few Caymans, older Caymans here and Boxers and that, and they look so small here in Bahrain because everyone's got Escalades and large four-wheel drives, Range Rovers. So the Cayman looks looks tiny. But I keep seeing pictures of the 997 on things as well now, and even the 997 at the back now, it's starting to look very narrow.
Yeah,
it never used to look narrow. It's looking, especially my base Carrera, it's looking very narrow compared to what else is coming out.
And I have to figure that that's due to this like size inflation in the 911 line. I have a photo of my car next to, I can't recall the exact specification, but like nearly a brand new 911 4S.
Yes.
And it's twice as wide as my car. I mean, it's incredibly huge. It's incredibly huge.
I was looking at a picture of a 996 the other day on Instagram. There was a certain angle of the 996. And it's weird with the 996 because now, to me, it's starting to look different. It's like cars, how a car designer sees a car when they're designing it. And then in years to come, it becomes how they were originally seeing it. You know what I mean? It ages into a certain way. And it's almost like the 996 has aged in that way. And I never realized how rounded it was and how curved it was. Even more so than the 997. I can't really explain it, but it's sort of like in that Porsche Unseen book where you see the prototypes where they've got a lot more curves. And you look at the 996 and you think, okay, that's what they were doing. That's the shape. And you can really see it
creating this line.
Yeah, you can really see it. Well, the interesting thing,
I talk 911s with a lot of my clients I have guys who own really unique cars from really standard cars. And everyone treats the 996 like the redheaded stepchild, other than the guys who own them or who have owned them. And I get into this discussion often. The 996 silhouette, if you look at it, it is gorgeous from the side. I mean, the lines are incredible. Yeah, I understand not everybody's a fan of the headlight, but when we're talking about the sheer automotive design, it's a really great
What was his name? Pinky Lai, right? Pinky Lai or Pinky Lay.
Yes, Pinky Lai.
Did a great job. He actually did a really good job. And it's taken this long for people to see it, but he has done a great job. Devan,
it's aged really well.
Let's talk about the drives. I haven't shared your Instagram either. I've got the one Instagram for you, so the guys, I should have shared it earlier on in the podcast. Is that the one you like to share with everyone to follow you?
Yeah. My Devan Vincent Instagram that's our business Instagram page, and that's where we'll share more about the car as it continues through its
fantastic. So
life cycle, because it's kind of part of our brand culture.
Perfect. It's so I'll just tell the listeners again. It's the Instagram is at Devan Devan Vincent Vincent. So make sure you go over to Devan's Instagram, follow, and tell him you heard his story. Let's finish. We've gone a little bit over. We haven't even talked about watches yet either. Maybe we can just come back to that very quickly. And I know you have to go because you're going to Italy tomorrow. You're flying away.
I set the whole day to prepare to go to Europe because who knows with COVID, like we have to go get our rapid COVID test. We got to do all this stuff. Like it's going to be crazy. But my favorite drives, it depends on the mood. If you're taking the 911T, and you want a raw experience, the way it's currently geared, which we didn't talk about, it does much better around town and on curvy small roads than it does on the highway. And in California, we have a highway culture. There's highways that go everywhere. I don't prefer to drive this car on the highway. I prefer it on small roads. So I like to, take it up out the back of where I live in the East Bay. And so I take it up around Mount Diablo. There's some excellent driving on these. I don't want to blow up my local roads, but there are often fun cars out here. And there's some excellent roads that wind out there into Livermore wine country. And then you can actually drive through wine country in Livermore back into the East Bay here in Danville, or I'll do the same thing in Napa Valley in wine country. And there's several roads there that if I'm in previous 911s, I enjoy driving, or my other more modern cars, because I have to take the highway to get there. But then you're driving around to wineries and maybe stopping, and maybe the driver's not tasting, but maybe the passengers are tasting. You're really enjoying those, windy roads through wineries and through the rolling hills here. We have some excellent driving here.
Yeah, fantastic. Hey, have you ever been tempted, though, because you go to Europe quite a bit, or you probably used to go to Europe quite a lot? Have you been tempted to try and get one of the Porsche rentals in Germany or Italy or something and take it for a spin on one of those famous roads?
Absolutely have. I just was looking at an experience while we're there next week for driving a vintage European car is what this rental service calls it. And I'll be staying in Lake Garda or Lago de Garda, and there's a service there that has many very beautiful cars. I don't know if it'll end up working out with our schedule, but I would love to do a Germany trip and do obviously some of the roads there. I wouldn't mind, I heard your last owner story with the GT3 say he wouldn't like to drive on the Nürburgring. I would love to. I think it would be a blast. I probably wouldn't drive in it in my car because I wouldn't want to ship it over there.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's on my bucket list, and I can't remember the name of this rally because I've been getting up at 4 a.m. for 3 days to prep my body clock, so my brain's a little silly. But there's a rally that goes from somewhere in France all the way to the edge of China, and it's like a 40-day rally.
Oh, really?
Yes,
okay.
And I'm trying to think. I heard about this on Spike's Car Garage, I think, or Spike's Car Radio. And the gentleman who did it in a classic 911. He brought all the parts he would need in case they broke. And basically they stay at really nice hotels. They go through really unique spots, and it's like a 40-day, car drive. I knew the name of it yesterday and it's just slipping my head. But I would ship my car over for something like that. But for driving on the Nürburgring, I'd probably just rent something fun.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go to Stuttgart. We were planning to go to Stuttgart just before COVID hit, and then we obviously couldn't go. But I was going to go to Stuttgart, and I was going to hire those cars that you can pick it up at the factory, and the new ones, and just take them for 2 days or 3 days. They get booked. They were booked out very quickly, though. I remember when I was looking, there was not much left. But I think that'd be a great thing to do.
Book in advance. Well, every time I go to Italy, I always try and find an exotic European of some kind at Avis or Hertz.
Yeah.
Because if you know the way the roads work there, they don't pull you over for traffic violations. They use speed cameras, and I know what the speed cameras look like, and I know where they are on the routes that I drive. So, I know how to really see what these cars can do, and it's really fun. I mean, I drove an A6 or an A7 last time I was there, and at 180 kilometers an hour, that car really feels planted. It's an amazing car.
My memories of driving in Italy was always flying into Venice airport and getting a rent-a-car from Venice, and then when I used to have to go to see factories in that part of Italy, and always in a Fiat. It was always a Fiat, and then driving the Fiat to Milan.
Yes,
and
Fiat,
always that left-hand drive Fiat, which was always a bit weird for me coming from Australia.
Oh, I can imagine.
Good memories. So, okay, you've got the 911T. You're going for a drive.
Yeah.
You and Brian are both, sharing watch stories and Porsche stories. What is the watch? What is the watch? Let's just do a match-up thing before we leave. What is the watch you match with your 911T?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the funny thing, and this is a connection I haven't necessarily heard made yet on your owner stories or your watch discussions, but I think there's a thread here that gets missed. What attracts me to the Porsche platform in 911s is the beauty in the mechanics and how beautiful things are made, and how this is very scarce in the world. That's actually one of the things I do in our business is we make things in an old world way by hand, and it's a really wonderful product and something that is more hand produced rather than a factory produced product. And so what I see this thread running through is in certain watches, you definitely can see the heritage in the build and the make. And so for me, that started with Rolex. I added a Polar Explorer when my son was born. This would have been 9 years ago. I thought this would be a great watch to buy to give to him when he has his first kid. and one that would be a good daily watch.
Yeah, the Explorer is great. Is that the red hand or the orange hand?
That's the red hand. The orange hand wasn't out when he was.
Yeah, I was trying to work out when
born.
it came out. Yeah, 9 years ago.
Yeah,
I have the orange hand, which I
love that watch.
Bought last year. I think it was last year.
It's a killer watch.
Yeah, I love it. I've been wearing it too much. I wore it the whole time in Dubai, actually, because we've been in Dubai for the last 16 days. So I pretty much wore it most days. I probably shouldn't have, but it was getting knocked around.
No, these are meant to. I mean, I wear my Explorer too. I've worn it climbing through the mountains, fly fishing. I tend not to take it to Europe because it's so well recognized that in certain parts of Italy, you may get robbed or it may get taken from you.
Yes.
So I actually will wear my Automars when I travel more because it's less known by standard folk. At least that's what I've been told by several of my friends who travel, is to wear a non-Rolex.
Which AP do you have?
I have the Royal Oak. What is that? The 41-inch bezel in black. I'm trying to think of the serial number.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
no,
actually,
I know.
I bought that from Brian, believe it or not.
Did you? Yeah, that's on my list as well. We're getting into watches here. We can talk for hours, but that's on my list. I know everyone likes the blue dial and that. I actually quite like the black. I don't have a problem with the black.
Me too. So that's the watch I love to wear in the T. Currently, the T is black, but I love to wear that watch and go out, take my wife out to a nice dinner and just have a nice drive and put on a dapper outfit. That's kind of my perfect evening if I can have one.
That's a beautiful watch. I hate to say it, in Dubai, I think I hardly ever see them. Even in London, I don't really see them on people's wrists. But in Dubai, I saw a lot. People were wearing them, which I thought was fantastic.
Cool.
I saw unexpected people. They're just everyone, and I saw a lot of those. I saw a lot of JLCs actually. A lot of people wearing JLCs.
Oh, neat, really?
Yeah, the Reverso.
Oh, yeah. That's a cool watch. I like the Reverso.
Yeah, my wife wants that one, where she's trying to work out which one she wants. We tried one on, but we didn't buy it, but she's definitely going to get one, I think.
Oh, I'm jealous. That's a cool watch.
But there's so many things. There's so many things to buy, that's for sure.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, the 911T and the Royal Oak are the two things that people never, if they know what they're talking about, they always mention it. If I pull up somewhere and someone knows 911s, they always will come up to me and want to talk about the car, which I love because I love talking cars. And the watch is another thing that guys who know watches, they love it. They want to talk about it. They want to touch it. They want to see it. They want to know the story. And to me, that's another thread of connection. That's one of the reasons I love wearing it, is when I'm in a meeting, maybe with a new client, if he's into watches or cars, we can talk about either. We can talk about all sorts of stuff, but those are two things that I can talk about for hours and just really enjoy. So they're fun threads. And I think they are connected. That craftsmanship, that execution that Porsche represents is also very well represented in high-end watches.
It's the appreciation, isn't it? It's the underlying things that some things you see, like, the bezel on the APs, on the, some of the Royal Oaks, the dial, the detail in the dial,
yes.
Even with Panerai, which people aren't really fans of at the moment, the Panerai, the little device protecting the crown,
I like the Panerai.
Those things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, every time I wind it, and I'm showing Devon now, but every time I wind it, I just get, just moving that and just winding it is just a great thing, and it's just those little tiny things that are important. It's the same as with our 911s. It's all those little things that you appreciate.
Oh, yeah. For me, that manual throttle control or choke control, if you're using an American car term, when you start up the T, that I have to open that up. It's carbureted, so I still have to flush out all that old garbage. I just love it. The whole process. It's fun.
All right, Devon, we've almost gone an hour and a half. I think we should end it here, but it's been a long one, but it's been a fun one. I've really enjoyed it. Anything you want to tell the listeners before we go? Anything you want to share with the listeners?
Well, obviously, everybody who listens to this podcast loves cars and likely loves Porsche. I would say drive something you didn't expect to enjoy. If you haven't driven something in the lineup, go drive it and see. I held some ill will against a few of the cars that I've now come to love because I never drove them. So if you're curious, just go find one to drive.
And that's what I really like what Philip said in the owner stories. Philip with the GT3, the high mileage GT3 from Belgium.
Yes.
all of them are special, as you said. All of them are special. You know what I mean? And I think that's a great way to look at it. You know, don't say, oh, that's not as good as, the 944 is not as good as the 911. The Boxer's not as good. They all are an important part of Porsche's history. They've all, they all come together as one. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's really important. And I thought that was a great thing that we sort of overlook sometimes, when we talk about the different variants.
It's so easy in the Porsche world to be so obsessed with what something's value is or its scarcity.
Yeah.
And to me, that you're missing the point. That isn't what this is about. If you're passionate about cars, it's about the experience and what connects with you individually. And everybody's going to have a different connection. So thank you so much for all you do for the community. And I just love your podcast. It's so wonderful to listen to on my drives. And I do a significant amount of driving. So
much appreciated. You. Thanks, Devan. And thanks for reaching out. I'm glad Brian didn't convince you to come on though, did he? He didn't have to convince you.
No, he didn't. It's funny. We talked about it. He said, I listened to his podcast. We talked about it. And then he goes, man, you'd love to talk to Michael because you and I love to talk about Porsche. So why not do it, on Michael's podcast? And I was already a fan. So it kind of made sense.
As you know, I could keep talking, but we should finish. Devan, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks again, Michael. Take good care.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Bye. That's Devan coming in from the Bay Area, California, US, with his 1969 long hood 911. We'll call it Hot Rod, Devan. Hot Rod. Hot Rod 911T with the, what is it called? Comfort package, isn't it?
Yeah.
Comfort package.
I think it is called a comfort package.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to the PorscheCooled Podcast. That's it for today. Bye for now.